And it is Thursday, August 22nd, 2013. My name is Dale Tafoya, and this is another episode of Athletics Talk Now. This is podcast number 116. We want to welcome you, A's fans, listening on YouTube, iTunes, Libsyn, Facebook, Stitcher Radio, and our website, which is Athletics Talk Now. We're a podcast and blog that celebrates the past and embraces the future of Oakland A's baseball. And on this date in A's history, Mark McGwire made his Major League debut. It was at Yankee Stadium, and he played third base and batted seventh in the lineup. He went 0 for 3, but we all know what Big Mac did the following season. He hit 49 home runs and shattered the rookie home run record. And joining me today is the first of two guests on the show. Rick Tittle, of course, is an outstanding hosting A's Talk on 95.7 The Game, the A's flagship station. And Steve Kettmann will be joining me immediately after Rick, a great writer and now a publisher. He's going to release Ken Korach's book on the late Bill King. Exciting times for Wellstone Books. And Rick, getting back to Big Mac, a lot of Americans remember Mark McGwire as this larger-than-life Herculean slugger who shattered home run records for the St. Louis Cardinals. But we can't forget, McGwire played 14 seasons in the A's organization. Any neat stories about Big Mac you wanted to share?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to be on the new site. Enjoyed my time on Athletics After Dark, and also looking forward to your next interview because we all want to get our hands on that Bill King book by Ken Korach. But yeah, it's funny, people forget that he was a third baseman, and so was actually Ken Seiko and Steinbach originally. But
that's right,
Rob Nelson at first, and they brought up McGwire, and I remember one ball going through his legs, and I thought, how is this guy ever going to play third? But we were all excited about him. We saw him in the Olympics. We know that the Mets were going to draft him, and then there was some sort of haggle, and they decided not to, and then the A's are quite happy that they drafted him. But I think when I think about McGwire, I think about that rookie year before he had the Jerry curl mullet. He was clean cut, and people started hitting him and hit him in the head. Remember his concussion and whole David Cone thing, and he decided he finally was going to charge the mound. But I think probably the one that lasted for me is that I knew McGwire was going to be traded, and I went to every game in that last homestand, and I would just try to sit on the first baseline and soak in as much of number 25 as I could because I knew he was going. And in the end, Sandy Alderson really blew it because he practically shoved McGwire down wall jock at his throat. They didn't even really want him in St. Louis, and they said, okay, well, you can have T.J. Matthews and Kenny Battle and not Wong. It was T.J. Matthews. Oh, Blake Stein. That was the other guy. Right. So it was a horrible, horrible trade, but Cardinal fans sure are happy.
Mm-hmm. And talking about the 2013 Oakland A's, Rick, a little over a month ago, we were talking about this team being considered one of the best teams in baseball. They were up 6 games over the Rangers, and some expected the A's just to cruise to an AL West title. Since then, the A's have lost 5 of their last 7 series and are 9-12 over that stretch. They're 2.5 games behind the first-place Rangers. Rick, how concerned are you?
Well, it's funny. I think we kind of got acclimated last year to the fact that you look at the A's and they broke the American League record for strikeouts, and they didn't have a lot of great players, but they won anyway. And you figure, well, Bob Melvin, pixie dust, and even though Bean gives Bob Melvin lousy players and young players, he makes it work. And I think we could just, with that 6-game lead, which seems like a long time ago now, it really wasn't that long ago, I think we got used to the fact that we didn't look at statistical things. They didn't make sense. But when you lose, and they are sub 500 after the All-Star break, then you start to look and you see that the A's do have a lot of lousy players. And when everybody is going the same, which is not very good, you need somebody to step up and hit that key hit. And they rely on a different guy every day, or Fryman, Sogard, Young, Vogt, whoever it is. And nobody's been able to be that guy lately. You drop a home series to the Astros, you drop a home series to the Mariners, especially in games like the last 2, they had the lead. And Bob Melvin, practically for him, was incandescent yesterday with rage at a lot of factors. But the A's, the good news is there's no reason to panic because they are a wild card team as we speak. And as you mentioned, they're only 2.5 games back in the West. But they have to get their act together pretty soon. So it's not panic time yet, but yes, it's definitely time to be concerned.
And it's interesting looking at, we're long-term A's fans, and just remember back in the 80s, when the A's needed a player, even when Billy first took over the team in the early 2000s, when the A's needed a higher gun under the Haas era, they'd trade for a Ricky Henderson. And even Billy in 2001, I believe, traded for Jermaine Dye. And now it's interesting because you get a Calaspo these days, to improve the club. Just interesting how times have changed. And back then, the A's, if they needed a Harold Baines, they go after and get a Harold Baines.
Well, we know it's a different kind of mindset with this ownership. They sort of wear it as a badge of honor that they don't have the funds to do anything, and they kind of say, if we win, we win, but woe is us. I remember talking to Mike Crowley, who last season, who's actually a very nice guy. He always gives me, time to talk to him when I talk to him. But I said, how is it when you wake up in the morning, how much is it we have to win today versus we have to get a new stadium? And he said, well, we're always trying to win, but the stadium issue is always at the front as well. I mean, as I said before, winning is not the number one priority for the A's. And people who think that it is, they're just not watching close enough. For the players, it is. For the coaching staff, it is. As an organization, winning is not the number one priority as it is with most MLB teams. There are other teams that are like the A's, but they're only going to spend what they get in. When they say, oh, we couldn't hold on to Gio Gonzalez because we don't have a new stadium. So they get a catcher who can't catch, and now he has a broken toe. They get a pitcher who's a minor leaguer. Now, I guess Malone's been called up, but, they have enough money to spend all they want. When they're a billionaire ownership, it's easy for me to say that because it's not my money, but it's a different kind of thing now where they're not going to make a big splash on a guy. And obviously you don't want to be paying Pujols money. I mean, the Angels are stuck with him for 8 more years. You look at the Yankees, they're stuck with A-Rod and all that money right now. So, yeah, you don't want to be dumb. But remember, the Callaspo move was much more impressive than the Kacharis move last year. So we'll see what they'll do for a backup catcher in this Orioles series. Something should come down pretty soon.
Speaking of catcher, let's talk about that position, Rick. First, the catcher. As a longtime A's fan, we remember staples like Terry Steinbach, Ramon Hernandez, and Jason Kendall. And since then, it's been kind of a platoon Band-Aid thing lately. How important is it, Rick, for the A's to address this catching situation? And is the answer in the house?
That's a good question. I mean, I asked that question at FanFest when they just recently had acquired John Jaso, and we kind of hoping. I mean, listen, John Jaso can at least hold up his hand and say that I can hit. Now, he might be out the rest of the year with this concussion thing, and hopefully he doesn't have some sort of Mike Matheny thing where he's done. But I mean, I look at the Norris play. He ended up breaking his toe because he tried to backhand the ball that was right in front of him. Had he turned his glove the other way, he wouldn't have a broken toe right now. It's just you figure that you'd learn that in Little League, but it happened in the ALDS twice in Game 5 with Parker through the wickets, both wild pitches. I just think Norris will never learn how to catch. And then you've got Jaso, who's got a Coco Crisp arm. So you would hope that there'd be a guy, whether it's a Bruce Maxwell or a Bill Taylor or David Freitas, you would hope there'd be someone, or Ryan Ortiz, there'd be someone in the system that they could call upon. And if not, they got to go out and get that guy, because to call up journeymen like Mons and then Vogt, yeah, we root for those guys, and at least Vogt can throw out a guy now and then. But it's almost like they sort of just ignore the catching position. It's just sort of an afterthought. And yeah, maybe you don't need your catcher to hit 280, but he's got to play defense. If he's only going to hit 219, he's got to be able to play defense.
Yeah, and I keep thinking, every time there's a pass ball or one of our catchers can't block the ball, a tough slider or a split finger, and how such an issue like that can haunt the A's in the playoffs, in the postseason, when every pitch matters.
Yeah, as I mentioned, saw it last year, and it hasn't gotten any better. So I'm not saying it's easy, but if you're a big league catcher, you should be humiliated if the ball goes between your legs. I think it should happen. I mean, it will happen to Yadi or Molina once every blue moon. Nobody's perfect, but it shouldn't be something that happens like every game.
In the last few days, obviously, Rick, we've seen a lot of frustration from A's fans, for example, on Twitter, about their recent play. But this team is still 16 games over 500. And sometimes as A's fans, we close our eyes and expect Billy to make it all work. You know, Billy Beane is such a progressive thinker, and who knows what kind of tangent or wave he's on now. But we just say, Billy will work it out. Billy will work it out. But that does not always happen. Nothing is guaranteed in this game.
No, and I'm not one of those guys, and you know me over the years. He is not one of those guys that I believe in. I don't believe in very many GMs. He doesn't even have one pennant to his title. So why would I believe in a guy like that? I guess if Brad Pitt plays you in a movie, then you're automatically cool at that point. But listen, when it comes to Twitter and social media, there's no such thing as cowards, and people will always overreact. And now, I'll be at a game and people are sitting next to me tweeting, Coco grounded out. I'm so sick of Coco. Send him to Sacramento. Send Coco Chris to Sacramento. Are you serious? So, yeah, people will always overreact. And as I said, there are no cowards in social media. Everybody's a tough guy.
Mm-hmm. My last question for Rick, and thank you for joining us, Rick. Rick, which player needs to step up and make an impact if the A's are going to make the playoffs the second half?
That's a great question. They were really leaning on Donaldson, but you can't expect him to do everything. I would probably say Cespedes, because in that lineup last year, he was such a factor even when he wasn't producing, because other teams knew he was there. And I don't think there are too many teams that are scared of him anymore. He had a couple doubles yesterday, which is good, but he plays a very lethargic defense. I don't think he's been coached very well from his time in Cuba. He takes bad angles, he drops balls, but just I can live with that if he's going to drive in runs. So I'd love to see Cespedes get back to what he was as a rookie. I think we all expected him, oh my gosh, now that he's got this first season under his belt, now the sky's the limit, and unfortunately he's regressed. So I would probably say Yoenis Cespedes is the one guy that if he steps up, I think it would be contagious for the other guy.
Any last final words to encourage A's fans the rest of the way, Rick?
Well, you could look at the world champions 8 miles away, and they're done. They're absolutely done. So this is fun. Even against the Astros, it's playoff atmosphere. If it wasn't, why do you think Bob Melvin's so upset? So I think it's great that here we are going into the last week of August. Every game, to me, has playoff atmosphere. And you look at the series coming up against the Orioles as well. Those are 2-game swings, maybe for a wild card spot. So just be glad that you're not a Giants fan right now, because baseball season would be over if you were a Giants fan.
That's right. That's Rick Tittle. I'm Dale Tafoya. Rick, as always, thanks for joining us. I consider you a friend and an ally to the show.
Hey, and congratulations on the new site. Best of luck, buddy.
Thanks. And my next guest is not only a publisher, but a well-respected journalist and author. He's a great ghostwriter as well, and author of One Day at Fenway, a book about his experience at Fenway Park. He runs Wellstone Books, which is going to publish and release A's radio voice Ken Korach's book on the late broadcasting legend Bill King. It's called Holy Toledo, Lessons from Bill King, Renaissance Man of the Mic. He's Steve Kettmann. And Steve, according to reports, we're looking at a release date of September 5th for Holy Toledo. Such a huge responsibility to capture the legacy of Bill King. What kind of emotions are you dealing with as the publishing date approaches?
Well, I guess the biggest one is relief, but I'll tell you, you're absolutely right, hitting the nail on the head about what an awesome responsibility and challenge it was. We set out, I guess really last year, Ken and I had started talking a little bit about the book idea. And then in the off season, Ken said, yeah, let's go for it. I would like to do a book on on Bill. And, the thing was, we back then were thinking about something on the short side, because here at Wellstone Books, that's what we're looking to publish in general, are shorter books that aren't afraid to inspire, that might inspire some people. And we thought, 25,000 words, which you mentioned One Day at Fenway. That would be maybe a quarter of the length of One Day at Fenway.
Sure. But
we just kept working. Ken kept working. He kept talking to people. He'd email me that he had talked to John Madden and had an amazing interview, or he talked to Flores, or, all these different people he would talk to, Rick Barry, and everybody got so excited talking about Bill, about what Bill had meant to them, about how he brought sports to life in a way that they'd never forget. there was a real magic to those interviews. And so we just kept going longer and longer. In the end, the book is 80,000 words, which is, again, right about that same length as One Day at Fenway.
What was the biggest challenge in making this book happen, Steve?
I guess it's stamina. Books are always like running a marathon, and I've run a couple of those. And you know, at some point along the way, you think you'll never finish, and it gets to be a little overwhelming. But the thing is, I want to emphasize about this project is actually, thanks to you and some other friends, we got a nice boost early on at the Facebook page for Holy Toledo, and it became a community. It became something that was larger than Ken or larger than me, larger than Pete Danko, who's an editor at Wellstone Books and also our associate publisher, a former sports columnist in Southern California. But all of us worked really hard on the project, but then other talented people kept coming in. Our wonderful designer on the book, Alvaro Villanueva. I hope I'm pronouncing it the way he wants me to. He came to us because at the Facebook page he saw about the book, and he sent us an email saying, "Hey, I loved Bill. I'd love to be involved." And he's an absolute professional. He's done a great job on the interior of the book, and I think readers are going to really enjoy the polish and all the nice little details.
And the author, Ken Korach, is, of course, a respected radio play-by-play guy. And how much applause should he receive, Steve, for the focus and sacrifice to make this book happen amid his
all the applause? All the applause. I just emailed Ken today to say, you know, we've had a great team on this project, but it's all about Ken. I mean, he's the one stepping into the batter's box here, and you know, it's tough. Any trepidation I might have felt as a publisher of trying to do justice to the great Bill King legacy, Ken feels that 100 times more, 1,000 times more, and he worked so hard on this. He went through, a long process of turning chapters into longer chapters and exploring some themes in greater depth. And, you know, he's really a wonderful writer. He did a great job with the book. I think people are going to be surprised. They know Ken as a great broadcaster at this point. He is a great broadcaster. He's got the timing. He's got the sense of moment. He knows ball. He knows his team. But he's also developed another quality where he, like Bill before him and like all the great ones, he rises to the occasion. And with this book, writing this book, he rose to the occasion in a big, big way.
And in the publishing business, you always question whether a great story is destined to be a feature article or is it book-worthy. What made you think this project was book-worthy, Steve?
Well, I'm one of many, many people who grew up listening to Bill. In my case, I'm 51 now. I grew up listening to Bill call the Warriors. That was the big one for me. And I thought I was going to Berkeley later on to study theoretical astrophysics and get my PhD and, you know, who knows what. But I loved words and the love of words that Bill instilled in me just by the magic of what he could do, bringing a picture into my mind of what was happening out on a court, things happening even before they happened. You know, Bill would say somebody's coming around to pick, and he would know what was going to happen before it did, the way that a great, you know, a Magic Johnson or a Wayne Gretzky knows what's going to happen ahead of time. Bill had that as a broadcaster. And so for me, it was simply a question of trying to give the reader the tools to revisit that and to understand Bill a little bit better than they might have. And there was no way we were going to fully capture the uniqueness of the man. It's not meant to be a comprehensive biography. We don't go into every detail. But I do think that even longtime fans of Bill's who think they know a lot about him are going to learn some new stuff. I'm sure of that.
And Steve, of course, the late Bill King was such a Bay Area figure, voice of the A's, Warriors, Raiders. How challenging will it be to capture some national headlines with Holy Toledo, and what's the strategy to do that?
Well, I'll put it this way. All we care about just a small number of things. We care that anyone who loves Bill and picks up the book will feel great about the book. They'll feel that they're getting to spend some time with Bill again, which we all miss. And we want the people who are kind of our natural audience to love the book. We want them to love the book. And remind me after this to talk about the cover a little bit. But to answer your question, The other priority is, I think you join me in feeling outraged that Bill King is not in a Hall of Fame.
Sure.
And we very much want to encourage voting for the Frick to get him in baseball's Hall of Fame. And so we will certainly be reaching out to some media people in New York and elsewhere and getting them copies of the book, talking to them about the book, having Ken. We've already got at least one event in New York booked for the book. And so there will be some interest. But we're not trying to be a national bestseller. As you alluded to earlier, I've done some ghostwriting. I wrote Juiced for Jose Canseco, a #1
Yes, you did.
bestseller. And I've been down that road. We're not trying to be a #1 bestseller here. We're not thinking about bestseller lists. We're thinking about those people who were familiar with Bill and who are the right readers who could really appreciate the uniqueness of the man and who will enjoy, revisiting a lot of that. And if some of those people are in New York and they can help as far as a little media attention for Bill and what a great broadcaster he was, the fact that, for example, John Madden, easily one of the greatest broadcasters ever, well, you ask John, hey, who were your influences? Who influenced you as a broadcaster? He'd say Bill King, and he'd talk about that in detail, and we have all that in the book. So that's the kind of thing that I do think might help build a little momentum in terms of getting Bill the Frick, and if we can play any role in that whatsoever, we'd all be very proud of that.
Let's talk about this book cover. I mean, what impressed me most about this cover, Steve, was just the detail. When Bill's in the broadcasting booth, you see the little snacks he used to eat when he would broadcast games, and just the attention to detail this cover provided was just mind blowing. Talk about the infancy and how you got the designer to create the cover and the concept.
Yeah, well, the artist is a guy named Mark Ulrichsen, and I've been a big fan of Mark's work for a lot of years. He's done a lot of New Yorker covers, and generally, if you ever see the New Yorker magazine on the newsstand, and it's a sports cover, it's Mark. He had one earlier this season, which I loved, where everyone knew the Yankees were going into the season old and broken down. So he did a cover where they were in, a walker and a wheelchair, and seeing the pinstripe guys in that kind of, depiction was a great way to tell the story of what the Yankees had become. So Ulrichsen, I love his style. Years ago when I was lucky enough to work with the great Roger Angel on a book called Game Time that I conceived and edited. I really hope to get Mark on the cover of that one. The publishers didn't go for it. Roger loved the idea, by the way. But this time around, I'm the publisher. I got to go with my first choice, and it was always Mark. And I tell you, Dale, I was excited when Mark agreed to do it. But when he actually did it and we saw the finished result, I was just thrilled. I know a lot of people love the cover. I don't know if anyone loves it as much as I do. I just feel it's perfect for this book.
Yeah, very impressive cover. And after spearheading this project from infancy, Steve, how much did your perception of Bill King change?
Well, that's a great question because I'm still working on that one, to tell you the truth. I was just thinking about that myself. Trying to remember when I covered the A's for the Chronicle from 94 to 98, I would sit side by side with Bill before the game, and do it was called the Oakland A's American League Update, and a little kind of commentary. And I tried to sort of put together how Bill seemed to me back then with all these other glimpses of him I get now. And the thing that I got to come back to is something that Ken and I have often talked. Ken's taught me a lot about a lot of things. Ken Korach, working on this book, but it's the how hard Bill worked, and I knew he worked hard. But any of us who cover sports, it's always fascinating when you get an athlete who's so talented, but then you find out that they're also out there, taking extra BP for an hour a day or studying tape or whatever it is to get better and better. And I remember once when I was in the booth with Bill, I looked over at his notes or his score sheet, and he had written down about 4 or 5 words that he was just learning and wanted to use in the broadcast that day. Now, I'd grown up with this guy being awed by his power with the language and his ability to not just pull out some word you hadn't heard anyone use in describing a basketball game, but the perfect word, exactly the right word. And to see that he was still working at that in the 90s when I was around him, that really awed me. And then working on the book, I've heard so many stories. Bill's daughter or stepdaughter, Kathleen, a wonderful woman, getting to know her in the work on this book was a real highlight of the project for me. But she told stories about they'd all be up in Sausalito, there'd be friends over, there'd be laughing, maybe a couple of bottles of wine open, and Bill would be enjoying it all. And then he'd leave to go work on, studying the Raiders for the coming season and doing all kinds of preparation and research. And he had a huge sheaf of stuff that he brought to every baseball game. I think the man might have worked harder at his preparation than any other great broadcaster I've ever heard of. Now, all the great ones work really hard, so I can't say that for sure, but it just might be that Bill worked even harder.
That's interesting. And what sticks out most of this project is the athletes Ken interviewed. A lot of former athletes for the book: Rick Berry, Billy Beane, Dave Stewart. And you wonder, how much do athletes pay attention to play-by-play guys in their career, if they're even a factor? But so many of these athletes came forward and wanted to pay homage to Bill.
Well, first of all, let me tell you my favorite quote, which we put on the back of the book, is from Bob Welch. And Welch, he won, what did he win, 30 games one year for the A's? I mean, he was, he was amazing. And we have on the back of the book, by the way, we have one of Bill's own paintings, which we can discuss, is on the back of the book. Sure. But the quote from Welch is, "If I had a hitter I had trouble with, I'd ask Bill how I should pitch him. He always had a good answer."
Wow.
To me, that is an amazing quote from an athlete, and a great one. That's how much respect Bill that they had for Bill, that they would seriously talk to him about how to pitch a guy. Now, I think one thing is, now in the Twitter era, so much has changed. I don't think you can have media types and ball players having too many of those conversations now. I just think any young ball player coming up, they just are they can't help but be a lot more cautious. They can't really relax with someone the way that a lot of guys would have relaxed with Bill. I mean, I'm sure Ken Korach, for example, has great relations with a lot of the players now, but I just think the players they're schooled in sort of media techniques, and I think that there was a depth over the relationships that Bill had with people that is probably something we won't see the likes of that in sports again.
And I know how brutal the mainstream publishing is, Steve. And if Ken would have pitched this book to a heavyweight publisher on the East Coast, you have to wonder if they would have thought Bill King had the national recognition to publish and market it. But I want to applaud you as an independent publisher for making this project happen.
Well, thank you. I don't think I ever mentioned it to Ken, but I'll tell you, there were points in the process where I thought, hey, I wonder if, Ken and I did touch on this briefly, but I wonder if, in fairness to Ken, if I should try to pitch this to a New York publisher. But I did consult with various friends on it, and we just thought there was no way we'd get to first base with a publisher in New York, just because they'd naturally be very uncomfortable with what is really a regional title. Right. Not enough people outside of California know about Bill. And for us, it's perfect because, I'll just give you a little bit of the backstory. I, as you know, was living in Berlin for quite a few years, and I've been together with a woman named Sarah Ringler, who works for NGOs, does international work, and we were visiting California and happened to visit the house of, at the time, a guy named Dave Wellstone. And when we found this beautiful piece of land here, 4 miles up from the ocean, with the redwoods right behind us, our own private trails through the redwoods, we decided to start what we call the Wellstone Center in the Redwoods. And I will give the website, wellstoneredwoods.org. And briefly, the whole idea is just to try to inspire people. And we figured what better way to inspire people than to have people like Ken, who a lot of people like myself love and respect their work, have them talk about someone who inspired them. So the starting point was the idea of, let's look at that. Let's look at the example of how Bill lived his life, how he went about his work, his craft, his art, really. I believe in the end that Bill calling a game amounted to a form of art, and we wanted to capture that. So it's our pleasure to get to work on such a great project, and we're really, really thankful to Ken for doing all the work and and for again being the guy standing in the batter's box and going for it. And he's going to be great out talking about the book as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, Steve, tell A's fans the best way to get their hands on this book and book signings. How are you going to work this out?
Well, what I would start with is the Books Inc. in Alameda is going to be the first store to have an event for the book. And they're kind of our headquarters local store because, truthfully, we're working out some of the details on distribution. But basically, Amazon is going to be a great way to get the book. And then there'll be select Bay Area bookstores. And we will have we're getting bookstores are contacting us. That's the kind of situation we're in where there's a lot of interest. But we will put information on which stores are carrying the book at the website, which is holytoledo.info, I-N-F-O. And also there is the Facebook page for Holy Toledo. Both of those places, anytime we know a bookstore is going to be carrying a big pile of them, and probably Ken will go by and sign some copies, that we'll let people know so they can get the book there or order it at Amazon. We're exploring other avenues as well, but at this point, that's what I can say for sure. And then we should also tell people about the A's are just being great on this. Then they're going to have a series of events at the games before the A's games on the 6th, 7th, and 8th of next month. Ken will be autographing the book, and the book will be on sale also at one of the stores at the ballpark. So that'd be a great way to get the book for anyone who hasn't signed up for it yet, just to go out to the ballpark that weekend, go have Ken sign it to you or to whoever you want to give it to as a gift, and talk to Ken a little bit about the project, because I tell you, he's very excited.
Will it be in a hardcover form or paperback?
What we'd like to do is it's going to start out being only in paperback and as an ebook, but we're going to publish a hardcover kind of gift edition, which will be along in probably 2 to 3 to 4 months. We want to have that for later this year, more really as a gift item. But we love the paperback because, first of all, we can keep it more affordable. It's only going to be $18.99 with a great cover. And the hardcover will be nice, but it might be a little more expensive. And we just wanted to be able to reach as many people as we could with the book.
So around September 5th, A's fans can go on Amazon and order Holy Toledo.
I think the 6th is actually the pub date. Yeah. Okay. In fact, I'm sure it is. It's the 6th.
The 6th.
I just didn't want to contradict you. But
okay.
It is. It will be the 6th. Yeah.
September 6th, everyone. Steve, thank you for joining us. I know many people are excited about this book, and once again, I want to applaud Ken and you for just making this great project happen. I'm excited about it.
Well, thanks very much. It was great talking to you.